And now, to introduce our guest speaker, Nishi Rajakaruna was born and raised in Sri Lanka. He pursued his undergraduate education in human ecology at the College of the Atlantic up in Maine, and his MS and Ph.D. in botany at the University of British Columbia in Canada. He conducted his postdoc research in plant ecology at Stanford, and he's taught at predominantly undergraduate teaching focused universities for 20 years and is currently a professor in plant biology at Cal Poly. Nishi fell in love with birding and wildlife photography during his 22-23 visit as a Fulbright US Scholar to South Africa. During his travels, he took photos of 402 bird species in Southern Africa and is looking forward to sharing some of his photos and stories. This time, we are going to listen to Nishi's presentation, and then we're going to turn on the cameras and the ability to chat. So you'll actually be able to ask your questions to Nishi directly. So Nishi, thank you so much, and take it away.
Thanks so much, Nancy. And thank you for 47 people who showed up on a Monday evening. It's just wonderful to see so many folks, including some of my former students in the audience, and all of my Facebook friends are here, including Mike Bush, who actually got me into birding before I went to South Africa. So I'm very grateful for Mike for taking me out a few times here in California, and also encouraging me with the birding adventure that I've had over the last couple of years. All right, so let me get started. Let me try to get my slide shared. Can you all see it?
Yes.
Okay, let me see whether
Just need to go to slideshow.
Yeah, hold on. Okay, got it. All right, I think I've got it. Can you see the full screen mode?
Good to go.
All right, perfect. Thank you everyone again for showing up. This invitation came about a year ago. Actually, I was probably out of the country when I got this invitation, and I kept thinking I've got plenty of time to put this together. And then last week, I realized that I have about 15,000 photos to go through to make this work, and which wasn't going to happen in a week. So luckily, I had posted a lot of my photos on Facebook, at least a few of them, every time I downloaded my photos onto the computer. So I managed to go through my Facebook account and download the photos off Facebook to put this presentation together. But it was a really fun adventure. So I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to share these photos with you. So as Wendy pointed out, I'm originally from Sri Lanka, and if you grew up in a biodiversity hotspot like here in California, I think it's impossible not to fall in love with nature. So from a very young age, I was fascinated with wildlife and plants, and had a mini zoo growing up, and was really kind of knew that I wanted to be a biologist at a very, very young age. And Sri Lanka is a tiny island about the size of West Virginia, but has 22 million people, has 7,000 wild elephants and about 1,000 leopards and about 500 sloth bears. So you can imagine the potential for human-animal conflict on this little island. But the biodiversity is really high levels of endemism despite the close proximity to India. 28% endemism in flowering plants, lots of, in amphibians, about 86, and even birds, about 14% endemism in birds, and Sri Lanka has about 35 endemic species, and that I'll show some of the photos from Sri Lanka as well. So, I got into university in Sri Lanka in the late 80s, and this was at the height of Sri Lanka's civil war, and the universities were closed, and it was not safe for young people or anyone to really be in Sri Lanka at the time. And I was lucky enough to get a scholarship to attend America's smallest university. It's a university that offers a degree in environmental science. They call it human ecology. And I got a scholarship. So I left one island on the Indian Ocean. I ended up on another island off the coast of Maine. College of the Atlantic is on the island of Mount Desert Island, which is where the Acadian National Park is. And I was the very first kind of fresh off the boat foreign student that they had in 1990. And right after I came, a student from China showed up as well. And now this university that had a couple of international students when I was there has about over 30% foreign students at this university, and everybody's studying human ecology. My advisor was a botanist, and I fell in love with plants very quickly, even though, I had this kind of broad interest in natural history. It was hard not to fall in love after taking botany classes with my advisor, who's now passed, late Dr. Craig Green. So my kind of, interest in natural history really, took shape while I was an undergrad. I took a lot of different classes, from mammalogy to marine biology to even ornithology, even though I never really pursued birding after. I loved my class that I took in 1991 with a Harvard-educated ornithologist called Bill Drury, who was also one of my advisors. So as you know, I'm not an ornithologist. Birding is something very new to me, and I'm just loving it. I'm just so happy that I got into it. I've just enjoyed my time being outside, and seeing the world in a way that I hadn't really seen before. But my professional work is on plants that grow in harsh environments, particularly serpentine soils. Serpentinite is California's state rock. And I've been interested in kind of the ecology and the evolution of these plants and lichens that are found on these types of rocks over the last, for the last 25 years or so. And I've had a bunch of graduate students at Cal Poly, and Michael Mulroy, who is on your board, I think, was one of my graduate students who did a really cool study on lichens of serpentinite rocks in San Luis Obispo County. And Tori, who's your program director, was in my biogeography class. I really enjoyed having him in my class, and I'm so, so happy that he's actually working with you all, doing a fantastic job. So in fact, Tori invited me to join one of your events this June, June 1st. It was one of your nature journal workshops, which was fantastic opportunity to get to meet people and also to kind of share some of the my fascination with serpentine plants. I spent a morning with Tori and a bunch of folks from the society, and hoping that I get to do something like this again this coming summer. I really enjoyed it. So as Nancy mentioned, I had this kind of great fortune to kind of go to South Africa during my sabbatical. I spent 11 months there at a university called Northwest University in a town called Potchefstroom. And Fulbright, as you may know, has been going on since 1946. It's one of the world's largest and international exchange programs. There are opportunities for students, faculty, teachers, administrators, professionals, artists to go to up to 160 countries, and they send people out of the US and bring people from those countries to the US. An amazing opportunity to teach, do research, and do and be kind of culturally immersed while they're doing that. So I went to South Africa in 2022, and the reason I went to South Africa was that I have a colleague there who is interested in the same kind of research. He studies serpentine plants in South Africa, also interested in kind of restoring contaminated landscapes with native plants. And so this is Stefan Siebert and I in 2022 on one of our trips to the Northern Cape, where I took some of my first photos on South African birds. But my relationship with Stefan goes way back. And in fact, I first met him in 1999. This is Stefan and I sitting on a serpentinite rock in the northeastern part of South Africa. And the reason that we met is because we attended the very first, our very first international conference. Him as a South African student who had just finished his master's. I had just finished my master's at University of British Columbia. My advisor said that there's a little bit of money left in one of his grants, and for me to find an international conference to go to. And I looked around. I was just getting interested in plants of harsh environments, and I found this conference at Kruger National Park, which you're going to hear a lot about over the coming, in the next little while. So this Serpentine Ecology Conference, which happens every 3 to 4 years, was happening in South Africa in 1999. And I attended it and presented my master's research on Lasthenia californica, which is a serpentine-associated species of sunflower family growing here in California. And at this conference, Stefan and I were roommates. So we became friends. And this is Stefan and I at the conference with all the giants of the serpentine ecology field, including folks like Art Krukerberg, who is a California native, late, passed on, but somebody who did a lot of work on serpentine associated plants in California. And leaders in the field from around the world. So we were the young master's students at the time. But interestingly, like my kind of serpentine journey started in South Africa as well. This is when I really fell in love with studying plants and lichens on serpentine soils. And then also later, many years later, 2 decades later, I fell in love with birds also here in South Africa. So while I was in South Africa, I was mostly teaching. The first semester, I taught a class called geoecology, which is a class that I currently teach at Cal Poly. And then I spent the next semester teaching, doing research and collaborating with some of the other South African botanists that I work with, have been working with over the last few years. But one of the things that I did was I sometimes invited myself to universities across South Africa and visited 12 universities and botanical gardens and research institutes, not just in South Africa, but also in Namibia and Botswana and in Madagascar, which was obviously a dream come true for somebody who's been interested in biogeography for a long time. So while I was traveling to these universities, I gave talks on plants and my research in plant ecology, but there's always people in the audience who are interested in birds, and I connected with them. And this is how I saw birds. I didn't make any special trips anywhere really to see birds, but when I was at a university giving a talk, meeting with students and collaborators, I found like-minded folks and I went birding with them. And that's how I ended up seeing a lot of birds during my full-time Fulbright position that I held over those 11 months. Of course, while in South Africa, you cannot ignore the big five. This is something that I, obviously really miss, seeing these big animals on a day, almost like a weekly basis, or anytime I got out to a nature reserve, a private nature reserve, or a national park. This is what people go looking for. And I was fortunate enough to see the leopard and the lion many times. The only animal that I missed was the cheetah, which I eventually saw this summer when I went on another short Fulbright visit. I was really lucky enough to get an opportunity to get a short grant from the US State Department, from the Fulbright Foundation, to visit Madagascar. It was a 2-week visit to establish research collaborations on plants that grow on serpentine soils. And in Madagascar, there's quite a number of serpentine outcrops and no one has looked at them. So I wanted to kind of establish a research program looking at serpentine plants of this really amazingly biodiverse island. And I got this opportunity to go to the University of Antananarivo, which is their main university in the capital city, and also the Botanical Garden, Missouri Botanical Garden, which is a kind of a branch of the Missouri Botanical Garden of the US. It's based in Madagascar, run by Malagasy scientists. So I had these 2 weeks there, mostly spent most of my time in classrooms and in seminar rooms, but I got out a few times. And of course, when you go to Madagascar, you got to see the lemurs, and it was just fascinating to see them in the wild. I was only there for 2 weeks. It was not like I had a lot of time, and I probably got out for about total 4 days. And in those 4 days, I saw quite a few lemurs. I photographed about 12 of the 110 lemurs. I saw 14, couldn't take photos of 2. And of course, for the birders in the audience, let's see whether you can figure out what animal or bird or what critter makes this call. You got to answer if you can. Are you guys all muted? Anyone know what this is?
All muted.
All muted. Okay, got it. Yeah. So you can put it on the chat. Let's see how many people guess what this is. I mean, I still hear this sound, every now and then. It just is an amazing thing to listen to when you're in the understory of Malagasy forest. And this is not a bird. It's one of the largest lemurs in Madagascar. This is called Indri, really an important critter in kind of Malagasy folklore and mythology. It's about 2.5 feet tall and can grow up to about 9 to 10 kilograms. It's a massive, pretty big lemur. And they make these crazy calls, up on the canopy, and then they communicate. You can see when one starts, you get this thing spreading all throughout the forest. And in fact, the Indri is known to be one of I think the only mammal outside of humans that has the rhythm in its vocalization. Outside birds and humans, this is an animal that has kind of the rhythm. So it's really, really cool to see them. And of course, when you go to Madagascar, the land of the chameleon, unfortunately, a lot of these chameleons end up in the pet trade. But there are lots of chameleons, about over 100 species of chameleons. And I photographed about 14 species. And if you see the video in the middle, I don't know whether you see that, it's small, but you see the chameleon essentially catching a little grasshopper right in the middle. I mean, some of these chameleons are so tiny. They are about the size of like, your pinky, and then some are pretty massive, about a foot long. And, I saw them in multiple places during my few days that I had to explore parts of Madagascar. So, going back to South Africa, before I left South Africa in 2023, the BirdLife International folks, the branch in Northwest Province, which is where I was based, invited me to give a talk on my trip, one of my trips to Sri Lanka, where I had taken bird photos from in Sri Lanka. But it was great opportunity to share some of my photos from Sri Lanka, which I'll do. I'll share a few of them today. But I gave a talk to the South Africans on Sri Lankan birds. And I wanted to point out some of the folks that really, got me excited about birding in South Africa. Many of them were students at Northwest University. Jonathan, right here in the middle, was somebody who really kind of got me excited about going birding at 4 in the morning. He would come pick me up, and we go birding in the morning and then come back for work, and he would go to his classes. And I met folks from the Bird Society there, and they were really kind enough to take me out on weekends and in early mornings to go birding around the university, but also sometimes we would make day trips or trips over the weekend. So my two friends, in terms of learning this new way of looking at the world, were obviously the Roberts Bird Guide. Roberts was a famous ornithologist in South Africa, and his bird guides and his app, which I used a lot, is an excellent app if you plan to go to South Africa. It's like the Merlins, but it's obviously got all of the South African birds, and the new versions get updated regularly. So it's a really good app if you're planning on a kind of a South Africa trip. And of course, I wanted a camera that was small, cheap, and something that I could put on a backpack. And I ended up asking Mike Bush, who's in this audience, what camera I should get. And he suggested this one because another one of our friends has this. So I ended up getting this camera. And the reason that I love it is partly because it has a really amazing zooming capacity, 2000 millimeters, and it's really light. And so I could use this as a binoculars. Most of the time I used it as a binoculars. So it's a binoculars that can take a decent enough photo that I can use to identify a species. Right? So that's a camera that I use. It's nothing fancy. And this is just kind of showing Jonathan, who's this kind of super naturalist. It's one of those kind of young, he again fell in love with nature at a very young age. This guy now works for BirdLife International in South Africa. He's still a student in biology at Northwest University. He knows his snakes, he knows his scorpions, he knows his lizards, he knows his plants, he knows his birds. And I just had a fantastic time hanging out with Jonathan. And he spent a lot of time taking me out around South Africa over the time that I was there. So South Africa is small compared to the US, about 12.5% of the size of the US, but has about the same number of bird species. I guess in the US, it's about 1,000 species. South Africa has about 856 species, according to South Africa's State of the Birds report from 2018, 68 endemic or near-endemic species, and quite a number of them are threatened or near threatened. I saw 437 species in the 11 months I was there, and I went for another 6 weeks this past summer on another Fulbright award. And so over the 12 and a half months was in South Africa, I photographed 402 bird species. And, so I usually only count birds if I photograph it. Even if it is a bad photo, I don't care. As long as I can identify it with the photograph, I would say that I've seen it. So technically, I have seen 402 birds from not just South Africa, but from Southern Africa, which includes one trip to Namibia, one trip to Botswana, and that 2 weeks in Madagascar. So this, is the very first photo that I took, and surprisingly, it is still one of my most favorite photos. And I was on a trip to the Northern Cape, a road trip from Northwest University. It was about a half a day trip, a little longer than that, to get to this area. Namakwa land is a botanical hotspot. About 3,500 species of plants and about 1,200 endemic species. So it is like super botany hotspot, and people just go there to see the spring wildflowers. And we were stopping there to see the flowers. I'm seeing families and genera that I'd never seen in my life. And it was a perfect timing. The rains had just come. And just like at Carrizo Plain and some of these other places that you get these super blooms, it was a super bloom year in the Northern Cape. And I'm looking at plants, I'm with my hand lens kind of on the ground. And suddenly one of my colleagues says that 2 blue cranes landed on this kind of carpet of wildflowers. And I looked and I saw these amazing looking birds, and I quickly took my camera out and I started shooting, taking photos, and I was pretty happy with the photos I got. And I didn't realize at the time that these were South Africa's national birds. And what I love about this photo is it's like I'm seeing the national bird for the first time. This is 8 days into my visit, and I see them on a carpet of mostly endemic flowering plants, right? So it's like endemic birds on endemic plants, and that was like the really cool thing about this particular photo. There are 3 crane species in South Africa, and many of them are, the blue crane, the national South African national bird, and the wattled crane are vulnerable according to IUCN list. And then the gray crown crane, which is beautiful. I wish I had better photos of these 2 other additional species, but they are all, the gray crown is an endangered species, and these are just very majestic birds, and you see them in grasslands, farmland. And the wattled crane, I saw it mostly in kind of wetland areas, and they were just really exciting to photograph, and not as common. You don't see them often. I only saw the blue crane twice in my 12 and a half months, the gray crown crane once, and then the wattled crane once as well. This is another one of my kind of favorite photos. This is on when we got to, so we saw the blue cranes on the Namakwa land wildflower carpet. We head to Namibia, which is another, 10 hours drive. We are in the Gobabe Desert or the Namib Desert. I tell one of the guys at the research station that, that I've fallen in love with birds, and I would like to take some bird photos of this area. And he tells me about the dune larks. He said that they're only found, they're like the only truly endemic Namibian bird. And he said that it's not that far from where we were. And he says basically takes me in his pickup, which they call a bakkie, onto these sand dunes, and we obviously get stuck very quickly. And the light was fading. It was kind of getting late in the day, and Eugene, this research botanist, ecologist, tells me like, oh, you should just walk. They are just down this trail, or just down where we got stuck. Just walk another 100 meters, and you're going to find them in that little area. So I started walking, and as I just went over one of the sand dunes, I saw these 3 ostriches, 2 young males, and with a female in the middle, just kind of walking onto the sand dunes. And again, this wasn't planned. Just ran into these birds. Saw ostriches a lot. It's one bird that you see all the time in South Africa, but just seeing them on the sand dunes, it was just kind of a stunning scenery. But after I took the photos, I moved on and I saw the dune lark. And these were this was a population that was being studied by some researchers at another university in South Africa. So they all were banded, but I found them and took a bunch of photos. Lots of larks in South Africa. And I managed to photograph about 10 different species of larks in Southern Africa, including in Namibia and Botswana, as well as in Madagascar. So this is another one of my kind of favorite photographs. I often look at it and think of it as a painting. I wish somebody could paint this for me. These are widow birds, and they're polygynous, and these males mate with about 5 to 6 females at a time. You find them kind of savanna, grassland, roadsides, farms. I mean, this was at a wildlife estate where my friend lives. I saw these birds just on the grasses, and beautiful. They have these long tails for a very short period of the time. It's not something that they have year round. And they're long. I mean, they're heavy, and you can see them struggling to fly across the roads. And I've sometimes seen them kind of hit by cars and on the side of the road. But obviously pays off to have a long tail. And all of the other widow birds have long tails as well. Here's a kind of a sparrow-like weaver. This again, the colors, the red bishop is the male has this beautiful red, and it only happens during the breeding season. And on the far left is a bird that's kind of molting, so it's just kind of losing its color, actually, or gaining its color. For the breeding season, because during the non-breeding season, both widow birds and bishops and some of these other really colorful and long-tailed birds look like the females. I mean, they're not very distinct in terms of the sexes, but during the breeding season, they just take this really beautiful color. Very easy to, they're very common. You see them in wetlands, in places like that, but they're just like, you never get tired of seeing these guys, just beautiful. This is another cool bird that I kept seeing, and really long tail again in the breeding season. And I posted these photos, on Facebook, and someone from Facebook, perhaps somebody in the audience, I don't know, immediately wrote to me saying, well, these guys are in California too. And in fact, they are a problem because these guys are brood parasites, and they're generalist parasites. And they are apparently really common in Southern California. And I looked up, and there are several papers that have come out in the recent years talking about, how these birds are kind of invading native bird nests, or becoming a problem. And the paper that I found was, in fact, them being a kind of a brood parasite on scaly-breasted munias, which actually come from my part of the world, from Sri Lanka and South India. But I've seen them in Laguna Lake and other places as well. And apparently in Southern California, the pin-tailed whiters are brood parasites of that bird, but they're generally, so it's possible that they could become brood parasites of native bird species as well. Here's another, there are a couple of whiters in South Africa or Southern Africa. Here's another one that has this like crazy long tail, and obviously much more colorful than the pin-tailed whiter. But this is another bird that I saw during the breeding season, and was able to take a couple of photos. And these are some of the other groups that I saw a lot of species of. The bee-eaters are my favorite. I just love them. I mean, they're just so adorable. It's just cute. And I just like, you can take like hundreds of photos just on bee-eaters. I mean, they're just so amazing. They come back to the same branch. They fly up, catch something, come back. So if you're patient, if you're just waiting for them to, even if you miss them the first time, they land almost on the exact spot on the same branch. And there are quite a number of bee-eater species. I photographed a bunch. The rollers are amazing. I mean, there's several species of rollers, and this is the lilac-breasted roller. And of course, weavers are really common. Lots and lots of species of weavers in South Africa and Southern Africa. And these were some of the kind of the early birds I photographed, just partly because of their just like strikingly beautiful colors. So there are 8 bee-eaters in South Africa, and I photographed 5 of them, 5 rollers. In South Africa, I managed to photograph 4 of them, and lots of weavers. I mean, 16 species of weavers, and I have photographs of 9. And, when you're putting a talk together like this, it's always, you got 40 minutes to do this, trying to figure out exactly what I want to show. But at least this got me started. So my goal for the winter break is to try to go through my over 10,000 photos I have of birds from Southern Africa and try to pull out the ones that I want to, save for future presentations. So these are a couple of the photos that I managed to find. The European beater and then the white-fronted beater. These are just, sometimes they're sympatrics in the same areas. There's some difference in terms of when they appear and when they're around. But this is just fun birds to photograph because they don't stay still. So you've got to just kind of be patient. And really, I mean, one thing that I was going to talk later is that birding taught me is to be patient and and stay focused. And I really kind of appreciate that in terms of this kind of new hobby that I've developed. Lots of starlings. So this is one of my kind of favorite starlings, the greater blue-eared starling, just beautiful colors. I saw quite a number of owls, and this owl, was, at night, and I didn't even realize my flash would work and could take a photo at night. And it was a decent enough photo that I managed to take with almost no light around 8 p.m. when it was pitch dark. And the Battuses are beautiful too. This is a Cape Battus, and there are a couple of birds that look like this, just tiny and just pretty. And then the golden-breasted bunting was another bird that I photographed. This most recent visit I did went to South Africa. So there are 12 owl species in South Africa, owls and owlets, and I actually managed to photograph 7 of them. I saw 8, but I didn't take one of the photos that I wanted to take, but I managed to take decent enough photos of 7 owls. And of the owls photographs that I took, or the ones that I've seen, this guy is my favorite, and this is the pearl spotted owlet. And it's tiny, and it's just amazing looking, and I love its call. Yeah, I didn't expect an owl to sound that way. So when I first heard it, I was just like, wow, I've got to see this. I saw it about 3-4 times, so it was pretty good. And these are very common birds that you see on these are birds I see on my way to work, every morning. So I always had my camera in my pack. So, always you leave at here you leave early to avoid traffic and find a parking spot at Cal Poly. But at South Africa, I walk to work. And I try to leave home as early as possible so I can do some birding before I get to my class. And that's something that I just miss, that kind of opportunity I had to have fun and do things that I love doing while also having a real job. I had to teach and do research and all of that, but I could make time to do this. And it's something that's kind of fast going away. And people like Mike try to drag me back into it, but I wish I had more time to do what I did in South Africa. So barbets are beautiful. There are about 4 species of barbets in South Africa that I photographed, and the crested barbet is really common, and I saw quite a few of them. The red finch, firefinch, blue waxbills, and the African hoopoe. Just beautiful bird. I fell in love with barbets in South Africa. So the one that's on the far top left is the black-collared barbet. But when I went to Sri Lanka, I actually photographed a few barbets from Sri Lanka, the yellow-fronted one, which is on the far right top and the left, and then the brown-headed barbet, which is very common in Sri Lanka, and that's on the right bottom. So here's a bird that is not very uncommon, but it's hard to see. It's a forest bird. And Jonathan told me that I've got to go to the forest to see some of the forest birds, because most of the birds I have photographed up to this point were basically savanna, grassland, urban setting birds, wetland type of birds. But the Narina trogon is the only trogon in Africa, and it's a forest bird. It's hard to see it, but once you find it, it just stays there. So it was really easy to photograph it once I got it. It's just a beautiful bird, and it just kind of turns its head all around almost. And it was just fascinating to stay under a tree and just take as many photos as I could of it. So in the interest of time, I'm only going to show some groups of birds that I took photos. I want to quickly go through the hornbills because I managed to photograph all of the hornbills in South Africa. So I'm just going to quickly go through them. The southern yellow-billed hornbill, I saw it many times in some parts of South Africa. Then the southern red-billed one, which is very similar in size to the yellow-billed hornbill, but has a red bill. Crowned hornbill is one of my I really like this guy. I only saw it a couple of times, but just much bigger than the other two hornbills that I just showed. Again, found in mostly all of these photos actually come from Kruger National Park, which is a place I would encourage you to go if you ever go to South Africa or come to South Africa when I retire there part-time. That's partly my plan. So hopefully you guys can visit and I can take you to some of these cool places I've been to. The African gray hornbill is pretty common in places where the hornbills are. And, I took a bunch of photos of this guy. This is an amazing hornbill. It's a southern ground hornbill. And it's kind of weird to see this. It's massive. It's like a size of a turkey walking on the ground. It can fly. It can fly quite high, and it lands on trees. But I was lucky enough. We were driving at Kruger National Park, and then we saw the pair on the side of the road, and that was quite the sighting. Just kind of see them right next to us. They're just beautiful birds, and they are and I think they're vulnerable or endangered. Let me just go to so they are vulnerable, and they're big birds. And this is another photo I took. I've got a bunch of photos of them on trees as well, and I've seen them fly, which is kind of weird. It's like a turkey flying a long distance. I saw the trumpet hornbill just before I left South Africa in 2023 in the eastern province of KwaZulu-Natal. And they're big, and they've got this massive casque on top of their bill, probably the biggest I've seen among the Southern African hornbills. And then, of course, I wanted to, so I photographed all 6 hornbills. So I'm pretty excited that I finally got an entire group taken care of, which was really good. And I wanted to show this hornbill from Sri Lanka called the Malabar pied hornbill, which I photographed as well. It's got a much bigger casque and a bigger hornbill than the trumpeter one. And it is near threatened, and you see them in a couple of national parks in Sri Lanka. Just a beautiful bird. The next group I want to talk about is the kingfishers. So I'm going to quickly go through the kingfisher photos. I've realized that I've got about another 10 minutes, 8 minutes left before I have to wrap up. So the Malachite kingfisher, kingfishers you can easily, once you kind of get into kingfishers, you've got to find them all. And I managed to get quite close. I managed to get almost all of the kingfishers in Southern Africa. And this is the Malachite kingfisher. I got the pied kingfisher, which is also found in Sri Lanka and other parts of the South Asian region. And, and it's just beautiful to just watch it hovering just over a body of water and just dive down. Got a couple of videos of that. The woodland kingfisher is, got this kind of shrilling sound that you hear when you're driving up and down these areas where they're found. And I often found them in breeding pairs, and just a beautiful light blue, and with a kind of a red upper mandible and a darker bottom mandible. This is one of the most common kingfishers I saw, the brown-hooded kingfisher, probably the first kingfisher I photographed in South Africa. The cool thing about kingfishers is that they always come back to the same place. This kingfisher, the same kingfisher that I'm showing now, I think I saw it this year when I went back. It was on the same branch, same place around the same time. So these are the kinds of things that I've kind of picked up through birding, which obviously all of you guys know because you've been birding for a lot longer than I have. But birds are creatures of habit. They come back to the same places, same branches around the same time. So if you're patient, if you can hang out behind that tree for 3 hours, you're going to get it. So this is the largest kingfisher in Southern Africa, the giant kingfisher, massive bird. I've seen it eat fish like twice as big as its head. And just a beautiful red at the bottom, on the abdomen, just above the legs, and just nice patterns. Striped kingfisher is another one that I saw. I only saw it once. It looked like the brown-hooded kingfisher, but it's got more stripes on the underside. And here's one eating a centipede. This is a rare one. I mean, it's not rare, but many people haven't seen it, including some of the South African birders that I know were really kind of jealous when I told them that I actually found a mangrove kingfisher when I was visiting the University of KwaZulu-Natal in the northeastern part of South Africa. And it looked very much like the woodland kingfisher, but there are differences in terms of its features. So I photographed 8 of the 10 kingfishers. I'm missing 2, and I'm determined to find those 2 down the line. But I wanted to quickly show this, my favorite kingfisher of all. This was in Madagascar. This took like 6 hours to find this guy. I had 2 days, and I spent 6 hours of those 2 days looking for this one. Finally found it, and it was in a dark forest. And it, once I found it, it just stayed there for a long time. I managed to get pretty close to it. And just a beautiful kingfisher, really tiny. The red was just amazing. There was another kingfisher in Madagascar, the Malagasy kingfisher that I saw, which kind of similar to the Malachite kingfisher of South Africa. But I mean, they're just tiny. I could spend all my time looking for kingfishers. So once I fell in love with kingfisher, when I went to Sri Lanka, I was going after Sri Lankan kingfishers and found the common kingfisher. It is kind of common, but it's just a pretty kingfisher, similar to the Malachite and the Malagasy kingfisher, just beautiful colors. The most common kingfisher in Sri Lanka is the white-throated kingfisher, and I've seen this guy eat like massive crabs, freshwater crabs. So here is one, kind of swallowing a crab whole. When during one of the visits I made to Colombo, which is the capital of Sri Lanka, I found this on a telephone line, on an electricity wire line, eating a freshwater crab. So it's a beautiful bird. It's very common, just like the brown-headed kingfisher of South Africa. But easy to see. You'll probably see it within 24 hours of going to Sri Lanka. Sunbirds is another group that I really kind of went after. It was hard to find them, and when you see them, it's hard to photograph them. But the white-breasted sunbird was just beautiful. I just took a bunch of photos of that guy, and then the greater double-collared sunbird, just stunning. It's just hard to take photos of these guys with the camera I have, but whenever they are still, and if the lighting was good, I managed to get a kind of a photo that I was able to at least say that this is what this bird is. The scarlet-chested sunbird, I wish I had better photos of this guy, but just a beautiful scarlet red on the chest, just a beautiful sunbird. So, of the 16 sunbird species in South Africa, I've seen 10, and I managed to photograph 7 of them. In Madagascar, again, there were sunbirds that I ran into. The Malagasy sunbird was just a stunning bird that I saw, mostly on aloes and other types of kind of tubular corolla red flowers. So Madagascar is, the second largest island on Earth. Lots and lots of endemics. 117 endemic birds. 56% of them are breeding. 36 endemic genera. So of the 117 endemics, I saw 44, and I photographed 35 of them in the very short time that I was in Madagascar. Here's another cool sunbird that I photographed recently when I went to Sri Lanka, the Lotan sunbird. Sunbirds are cool, like hummingbirds. I've only seen the Anna's hummingbird in California, and I've been looking for the other hummingbirds and, hoping that I can get some cool hummingbird photos in California over the coming months or over the coming years. But the sunbirds were just stunning to photograph, and really quite the patience required to photograph these guys. So in Sri Lanka, I photographed all 3 of them. There are 3 sunbirds, very low diversity compared to Africa, but photographed all 3 of them. Quickly, some cool birds of prey. The Bateleur, this is 2 young ones that I saw with a mom, and they were just all hanging out together. The 2 young ones on the side and the mom in the middle. That was kind of fun. That was really kind of a cool encounter. The lizard buzzard, again, a really cool bird. I got pretty close to it, and it was just doing some weird stuff. It was turning its head around, looking at me, getting on the ground, and I managed to get quite close to it, which was really cool. The tawny eagle I saw it a few times, and this is one time it was kind of spreading its wings up on top of a shrub, and managed to photograph that guy. Other birds of prey that I saw, very common, the black-winged kite and the brown snake eagle. Black-winged kite, you see it all the time. It's, like the red-winged hawks or the red-shouldered hawks in California. They're really common, and you see them pretty much daily. So there are 45 eagles, hawks, falcons, and buzzards. I managed to photograph 19 during my time in South Africa. And this is, a cool kind of raptor, eat snakes. This is the secretary bird. I wish I had better photos, but I was always looking for these guys. These are endangered, and they're not easy to find. and when you find them, as soon as you get out of the car or you roll the window down, they're gone very quickly. But these guys fly too, but just massive birds, and just really, I wish I had more time to photograph them. I managed to see a lot of vultures. In fact, I saw, 7 out of the nine vultures in South Africa. I photographed 7 of them. There are 3 vultures on the screen and the black eagle or the Borax eagle on the far left. I've seen them. I've taken photos, but these photos were taken at a breeding rehabilitation center because the photos I have, they were mostly in flight. I did see the bearded vulture on a carcass one time, but I couldn't really get close to it. But these are endangered. The white-headed vulture is endangered. The bearded vulture is the only vulture that feeds on bone marrow, so it predominantly feeds on bone. And then the palm nut vulture, which is on the bottom right corner, is really unusual in that it feeds on palm seeds, right? Palms from raffia palms and phoenix palms, and it eats some other, it eats some, mollusks and other things, but it's predominantly vegetarian. So it's a vegetarian vulture, which I thought was pretty cool. Lots of other birds I saw that don't have time to spend, show you guys, but the purple-crested turaco I saw once. It's just beautiful, crest on the head. Lots of water birds that I saw, about 45 species of them. I was able to photograph storks, snipes, and also the red-throated wryneck. Every time I saw it, kind of reminded me of a northern flicker. It had the kind of the same kind of look and the behavior. Saw both greater flamingos and lesser flamingos, mostly in Namibia, and they were just kind of fun to watch. Woodpeckers is the last group I'm going to talk about. I mean, there are about 7 woodpeckers in South Africa, and I was able to photograph 4 of them. The ground woodpecker at the bottom was like really interesting. They nest in like cut banks. They nest communally, so lots of birds hanging out together. That was kind of a fun encounter to see a community, like a little population of ground woodpeckers in the eastern Cape province of South Africa. I saw 2 endemic birds in South Africa. So the rock jumpers are hard to find. They are rare and endangered. I saw one in the Drakensberg, which is on the Eastern Cape, and then on the Western Cape, where the fynbos is, the Cape rock jumper. And people go there looking for rock jumpers. I mean, they're hard to find. And I saw both species that are endemic to South Africa. Another group that I've kind of fallen in love with is the white eyes, and I'm sure you've seen them in your travels, but I've seen white eyes from like 2 species, both species in South Africa, the species in Madagascar, and then the 2 species, 2 from Sri Lanka, the Indian white eye, and then the Malagasy white eye. I mean, they are just kind of fun birds to photograph as well. They never stay still. They're just running, flying all over the place. But the eye is just stunning. Always try to kind of catch that eye when I can. I want to quickly the last couple minutes, I want to quickly kind of introduce Sri Lankan birds to you. I mean, there's a lot of cool birds in Sri Lanka, 35 endemics. Sri Lanka's national bird is the jungle fowl that you're seeing in the video above. Lots of bee-eaters and eagles and owls. And among the birds in Sri Lanka, like I've just started photographing Sri Lankan birds. There are 441 species of birds in Sri Lanka, and I've photographed 119 of them so far. So maybe down the line, maybe I could give a talk on Sri Lankan birds as well. So painted stork is something, beautiful stork. This is something that I see in the dry zone of Sri Lanka quite a few times. I've seen them in other areas of Sri Lanka over the last few years, but they used to be mostly restricted to the dry zone, but now you're seeing them in other parts of the island as well. Flamebacks, woodpeckers, there are quite a few endemic ones, and this is one that's endemic called the crimson-backed flameback. Very, very high up on the forest canopy, but managed to take some photos that I was able to identify the bird. But these are really cool woodpeckers. You can hear them from a distance, just like the pileated woodpeckers of North America. They're about the same size, maybe slightly bigger. So, Sri Lanka has a lot of cool biodiversity and small island. It's easy to get to, national parks. There are two main national parks, Yala in the southern part of the island and Wilpath in the northern part of the island. You see, you're guaranteed to see a leopard within 24 hours. It has the highest density of leopards in the world, and about 1,000 leopards living in these national parks. If you decide to go to Sri Lanka, reach out to me. I'm happy to give you some tips. So in terms of birding in North America, I'm just getting started, and I'm grateful for people like Mike and Nick who's taken me out, and Carrie Miller, who's taken me out birding, and of course Michael Mulroy, and I have gone birding a few times, but I'm just getting started. This was at Yellowstone. I've been looking for the American Dipper for a while, and I actually managed to get quite close to it just a couple of weeks ago when I made a quick trip to Yellowstone. I've photographed about 137 species in North America, so far, and there's a lot more to go. So I'm looking forward to spending the next little while, any free time I can make to photograph birds here. So I wanted to kind of show that, share with you that I've really kind of enjoyed this hobby that I've just developed, and I've learned how to see the world in a different way. So I know I see things that I never would have seen otherwise. And you know what I'm talking about because you guys are birders. I'm a teacher, so I talk a lot, but I've learned how to listen more and talk less as a result of birding. Focus, I was raised as a Buddhist, but my mom and grandmother used to tell me to meditate, and I never been able to do that. But birding has gotten me the closest it has ever gotten me to kind of have my mind in one place and focus and learn patience. I mean, you've got to be patient when you're birding, especially when you want to take photos. I mean, you've got to stand behind a tree for a number of hours until the bird shows up. And of course, it's given me a way to enjoy life outside of work and realize that, you work, you don't live to work, you work to live. And when I was in South Africa, I had this opportunity to really balance my work and life, which I have struggled much of my life. And I found that kind of balance during that year that I was in South Africa. So thank you so much for spending this hour. I'm sorry that I went 5 minutes over my allotted time, but I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Yeah, thank you, Nishi. Those are great life lessons. And it was actually like a walk down memory lane for me because I've been in Southern Africa a couple of times. So it was really great. And your passion is evident as you tell your stories about the birds. And we'd love to have a talk on Sri Lanka. I have many
Or a
colleagues
field
there.
trip.